Before pickup trucks became status symbols with 12-inch screens and monthly payments that never end, they were something else entirely. They were tools. They were partners. They were the things standing between the farm, making it through the season, and not making it. Today, we're talking about 5 pickup trucks that never let their owners down. The Power Wagon, the C10, the F-250 Highboy, the International Scout, and the Square Body Hilux, closing it out. Let's get into the first one. This is the channel that still remembers when trucks were built to last. No dealership talk, no hype about the latest model. Just the iron that proved itself the hard way, field by field, mile by mile, year after year. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now and ring the bell. Every week we bring you what the salesman hopes you never find out. There are trucks built for the road. And there are trucks built for where the road ends. The Dodge Power Wagon was built for where the road ends, and it was built there from the very beginning because it didn't start as a civilian truck at all. The Power Wagon came directly out of World War II. The military WC Series Dodge 3/4-ton trucks that had served in every theater of the war came home with a reputation that Dodge understood immediately. These trucks could go anywhere. They could pull anything. They could be beaten, overloaded, neglected in field conditions that would destroy most machines, and they kept going. The men who drove them in the war came home knowing something that the civilian market hadn't learned yet. And Dodge put that knowledge into production in 1946, when the Power Wagon went on sale to the public. The civilian Power Wagon kept everything that made the military version indestructible. Solid front and rear axles. Low-range four-wheel drive at a time when four-wheel drive in a pickup was almost unheard of. A winch mounted to the front bumper, because Dodge understood that a truck capable of going where no other truck went was also a truck that was going to get stuck in places where no other truck could pull it out. The Power Wagon was its own rescue vehicle. It came prepared for the worst case because the worst case was where it was designed to operate. A documented 1967 Power Wagon was reported to have covered 275,000 miles and continued running reliably. That number, accumulated in an era of dirt roads, primitive fuel quality, and maintenance that happened whenever the owner got around to it rather than on a manufacturer-recommended schedule, says everything about what Dodge built into that chassis and that drivetrain. It wasn't engineering designed to impress at the dealership. It was engineering designed to survive in conditions that most people never experience and that the Power Wagon's owners faced every single day. The farmer in Montana who bought a Power Wagon in 1952 didn't buy it because it was the most comfortable truck on the market. He bought it because the nearest town was 40 miles away, and the road between his property and that town was a suggestion at best, and a hazard at worst. He needed a truck that would start in winter cold, that would kill anything less robust, that would cross a creek when the bridge was washed out, that would pull itself free when the mud got deep enough to swallow the axles. The Power Wagon did all of that. Every time. Hold on, because the next one was the truck that defined what a farm pickup looked like in America for 2 decades straight. Walk into any rural auction in America today and look at the parking lot. Not the show trucks, the working trucks, the ones with the faded paint and the dents that came from actual use, and the beds that have carried everything from hay bales to fence posts to the occasional piece of equipment that was too big to fit but went in anyway because it had to. In that parking lot, you will find a Chevrolet C10, probably more than one. The C-Series Chevrolet trucks launched in 1960 with a design by Harley Earl that managed to look genuinely good while still being a working truck, which was a combination that the market hadn't seen put together quite that successfully before. The C10, the half-ton version, hit a sweet spot of capability and accessibility that made it the default choice for farms, ranches, small businesses, and anyone who needed a truck that could actually work without requiring a second mortgage to maintain. Engine options across the production run gave buyers flexibility to match the truck to the work they needed it to do. The inline-six was the choice of the owner who wanted reliability and economy. The small block V8 was the choice of the owner who wanted a little more pull when the load got heavy. Either way, the result was a truck with a mechanical straightforwardness that the owner could understand and maintain without specialized knowledge or expensive dealer service. The 1967 to 72 generation is the one that most people picture when they think of the C10. Clean lines, a look that hasn't aged the way that many trucks of the same era have aged, and a robust construction that has allowed examples of this generation to survive in working condition decades after anything less well-built would have rusted into uselessness. The fact that these trucks are still appearing at farm sales, still being bought by people who intend to actually use them rather than restore them for shows, is the most credible testimony available about what Chevrolet built into them. The C10 was never the most capable truck on the market. It was never the most powerful or the most sophisticated. It was the most present. It was the truck that was there every morning when the farmer needed it, that started in cold, that would test any machine, that carried what needed to be carried and went where it needed to go without requiring special treatment or careful handling. That presence, sustained over decades, built a reputation that no marketing campaign could manufacture because it was built entirely from real experience. Get ready, because the next one carried a nickname that its owners gave it for a reason that had everything to do with how it was built. Nobody at Ford called it the Highboy. Ford called it the F-250 four-wheel drive. But the people who bought it and used it took one look at that 4-inch suspension lift that the four-wheel drive system required and gave it the name that stuck: Highboy. Because that truck sat up higher than anything else on the road in its era, and that extra height wasn't for looks. It was engineering. The F-250 Highboy ran from 1967 to 1977. 10 years of production of a truck that the working rancher, the logger, the oil field worker, and anyone else who needed genuine capability in genuinely difficult conditions adopted with an enthusiasm that the numbers reflected. This wasn't a truck for the suburban buyer who wanted four-wheel drive for occasional gravel road use. This was a truck for the person whose daily reality required everything the Highboy offered, and who understood that what it offered was real rather than promotional. The transfer case in the Highboy was separate from the transmission, connected by a short drive shaft, which required the front drive shaft to be longer than it could be without that 4-inch lift. The geometry that created the Highboy name was engineering necessity, not styling choice. And that engineering necessity created a truck with ground clearance that allowed it to work in conditions where the standard height F-250 would have been sitting on its frame. Engine options included the 390 cubic inch V8, the 360, and eventually the 400. Pulling power that translated directly into capability on the ranch or in the field. Ford built these trucks with the understanding that the buyer was going to ask more of them than the spec sheet promised, and built in enough margin that the truck could deliver what the buyer actually needed rather than what the brochure described. Today, the F-250 Highboy is one of the most sought-after classic trucks in America, not because it's rare, although clean original examples are getting harder to find, because the combination of genuine capability, honest construction, and a look that communicates exactly what the truck is built to do resonates with people who understand what trucks are supposed to be. The Highboy didn't try to be anything other than what it was, and what it was exactly what the working owner needed. Now we get to one that was ahead of its time in a way that the market never quite recognized until it was too late. International Harvester had been building farm equipment for over a century when it decided to build a small four-wheel drive vehicle in 1961. The company understood farmers. It understood the specific kind of tough that farm equipment needed to be to survive daily use in conditions that would be considered extreme by any other standard, and it put that understanding into the Scout. The Scout II, which ran from 1971 to 1980, was the version that found its audience. The Dana 44 front axle that the four-wheel drive version used was the same axle that was showing up in the most capable off-road vehicles of the era. Chosen because it was the hardware that matched the demands of serious off-road use, rather than the hardware that was cheapest to produce. International wasn't building the Scout to a price. It was building it to a standard. Engine options included a 4-cylinder, a straight 6, and V8 options including a 5.6-liter that gave the Scout genuine pulling power in a package that was compact enough to go places where the full-size trucks of the era couldn't follow. The combination of capability and compactness was exactly what the rancher with rough terrain needed, and exactly what the recreational user who wanted to go somewhere genuinely difficult needed. The Scout served both audiences without compromising for either. What the Scout never got was the market recognition that its quality deserved. Ford and Chevrolet had dealer networks that blanketed the country. International had a dealer network built primarily for farm equipment sales that didn't have the same retail reach for a vehicle category product. The Scout was better known among the people who actually used it than among the general public, and when International Harvester's financial difficulties ended Scout production in 1980, the truck left the market before most people had fully understood what it was. Today, the Scout has the kind of devoted following that develops around products whose quality was greater than their commercial success. People who own Scouts talk about them the way people talk about things they've discovered that most people missed, with a combination of pride in the truck and genuine puzzlement that it never got the recognition it earned. We've reached the last one. And this one carries a reputation that was built not in one country, but around the entire world. There are trucks with good reputations, and then there is the Toyota Hilux, which has a reputation that operates in a category by itself. The square-body Hilux, the generation produced through the 1970s and into the 80s, came to America carrying something that no domestic truck manufacturer had built in the same way. The specific kind of indestructibility that Toyota had engineered into that platform had been tested in conditions that American manufacturers hadn't designed for, validated in markets where maintenance infrastructure didn't exist, and failure meant genuine disaster rather than inconvenience, and it arrived in the United States already proven in a way that took the domestic competition decades to acknowledge. The engine was a 4-cylinder diesel in the versions that the working owner wanted. Simple, honest, dimensioned for longevity rather than peak performance, with a tolerance for imperfect maintenance conditions that reflected engineering humility about where these trucks were actually going to be used. Not on scheduled service visits to well-equipped dealerships, in fields, in mud, in conditions where the engine was going to get what it got and was expected to survive it. The frame was the other part of the equation. Built to a standard that felt over-engineered by the specifications of its era, the Hilux square body chassis proved its capability not through manufacturer claims, but through documented performance in conditions that were specifically designed to find the limits of what any vehicle could survive. Those tests, conducted publicly and recorded in ways that circulated internationally, established the Hilux's reputation in a way that no advertising campaign could have replicated, because advertising can be questioned in ways that documentation cannot. The American owner who chose a square-body Hilux in the late 70s or early 80s was typically making a deliberate choice based on what they knew about the truck's reputation from people who had used it in conditions harder than anything they were likely to face. The rancher in Idaho who bought one in 1979 because a friend had one that had been run hard for 5 years without a serious mechanical problem was making a rational decision based on real evidence. And the truck delivered on that evidence, in most cases for far longer than the owner had expected when he bought it. The square-body Hilux owners who still have their trucks today, decades after the last one rolled off the production line, share a specific characteristic. They don't talk about the truck the way collectors talk about something they're preserving. They talk about it the way farmers talk about good land. It produces. It keeps producing. You take care of it, and it takes care of you. That relationship, sustained across decades of hard use, is what the square-body Hilux represents. Not a classic in the sense of something preserved from use, A classic in the sense of something that has proven, through continuous use, that it deserved the reputation it was given before most people understood why. The Power Wagon, the C-10, the F-250 Highboy, the International Scout, and the Square Body Hilux. 5 trucks that were built when the definition of a good truck was simple. Does it start? Does it go where you need it to go? Does it carry what you need it to carry? Does it come back? All 5 of them answered yes to every one of those questions. For decades. Without the electronics that modern trucks need to function, and without the dealer network those electronics require when they fail. With iron and engineering and a standard of construction that assumed the owner was going to ask more of the truck than the manual promised. That's what these trucks were. That's what their owners remember. And that's why, half a century later, the owners who still have them aren't selling. Tell us in the comments. Which of these 5 did you grow up with, work with, or still have sitting in your garage? Which one do you still see working today? Drop it below because we want to hear that story. Like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell. Next week, we've got more content that the dealership hopes you never watch. See you then.